Thanks for that introduction, and thanks for all coming out tonight. It's great to see you all here and hopefully wanting to understand a bit more about the issues. I work in academia, but in the research realm of academia. So I've been looking at plastics and plastic pollution over the last 15 to 20 years actually, and seen just the growing rates of plastic in our environment. Now, obviously we're here to talk about synthetic turf fields, and we've all heard the problems with different aspects of their health, environment, but also the benefits of them as well. Most fields are what are called 3G fields, so third generation fields, requiring some infill. So most around the state and around the country are still these older models, but they are moving into a 4G realm where there's less infill or no infill. But if we have a cross-section look through what a field looks like, basically it's plastic on plastic on plastic if you really want to talk about it. Obviously there's the blades, we all know is plastic. Then most of the infill has been rubber crumb, which is shredded tyres, but most of the tyres these days are a synthetic blend with natural rubber, so they're considered a plastic. And while it was seen to be a great avenue to dispose of end-of-use tyres, we're finding they're leaving the field and causing problems, and there's a whole lot of issues around the toxicity of that, which I'll show you in a minute. There's a polyurethane backing and then a rubber shock pad as well. So, you've got all these layers which, when it comes time to recycling, you've got to kind of separate all those. And while it is possible, there's a lot of plastics being used. And while I'm looking at microplastics, we're seeing this leaving the field as well. So, next slide, please. I'll talk about rubber crumb. Firstly, so rubber crumb, as I said, most of it's called styrene butadiene rubber. So like polystyrene, so it's made from the same polymer. But there's a whole range of other chemicals in that rubber crumb. So you think about the tyre itself, whatever was put in to make the tyre is still there in the crumb. So there's a lot of metals, particularly zinc, lead, cadmium, copper, example. There's fillers like carbon black, which we know is a carcinogen. There's volatile organic compounds that go up. Volatile just means they're going to go into the air and cause potential harm by us breathing them. And then a whole range of other things that are added as antioxidants. So there's to make the tyres last longer, they add chemicals in there. And so the 1,6-ppd is an interesting one because there's been studies overseas showing that the breakdown products of that chemical causes harm to Atlantic salmon. So it's also toxic. So there's a range of chemicals apart from, obviously the base polymer, which is that synthetic rubber. So we just got to keep that in mind. Okay, next slide, please. So we ran some toxicity tests with that rubber to see, what effects it is having in our waterways. So, as I said, where there's data from overseas showing that there's effects in salmon, we did some tests on some aquatic invertebrates. So we've got 3 species there, those little pictures you can't probably make out too much. The one on the left's a little water flea, it's called. It's a Cladoceran. So it's in our freshwater system, so it's a freshwater critter. The other 2 are actually larvae. So one's the mussel larvae and the other one's a sea urchin larvae, which are both marine. So we use these because they're sensitive to change in the environment. They're kind of sensitive to chemicals and changes happening in the environment. So we use them. They're actually more sensitive than fish to those changes. What we did some what's called leach trials, and we put rubber crumb in the bottle, leached it for about 18 hours, and then exposed these critters either for 42 or 72 hours, so 2 or 3 days to see what was happening. And the bars down the bottom really show the response. So when they're high bars, it basically means there's no response, and on the left is 0. And when we first did the tests, we put 100% of the leachate there, and it killed everything within hours, all those 3 species. We had to dilute it down, and then what you're seeing in the bars is basically we're seeing effects down to 3%, or depending on the species, around that level. So you had to dilute it down until there was only 3% of that leachate mixed with water before we got no effects occurring, all right? So in other words, it's telling us it's highly toxic. And so we measure that by EC50s, or you might have heard of things like LC50s or LD50s. That is just a measure that tells us what percentage is harming 50% of the population. It's a standard reporting measure. So for this leachate, we found between, let's say, 1 to 3% of the leachate was harmful to 50% of that. And they use that for regulation and for deriving water quality guidelines. So in other words, we're finding small amounts can be toxic. And when we looked at the chemistry of that leachate, what was the products in that leachate, as I said, heavy metals were high, particularly zinc was through the roof. The 6-ppd, which is an antioxidant that was affecting the salmon in the US, we also found was elevated, and a few other chemicals. Now, this was an unfunded study, and we haven't actually got money to go further, but it's at least showing us some initial concerns about the leachate, and this is of the rubber crumb. Okay, so this is why we're pushing to get at least the rubber crumb removed from our synthetic sports fields. We've also looked at around sports fields in Sydney, different sports fields, and measured what was coming off the fields to try and quantify that in some way. We took core samples of the soil at different distances away from the field, and when it's close to the field, you can see that number of 24,000 bits of, in this case, rubber crumb, right up against the field. As you go away, we're finding it out to 8 metres away from the field, but at lower levels. So higher, it kind of makes sense. The higher loads are right next to the field, and then it drops off. In some fields, they've got measures to capture that, and that's great. And so they put baskets in their drains. So if anyone's been to some of the fields, there's some drain systems that capture that water runoff from the field if they don't have an internal system. And we looked at what was in those drains. There were some baskets put out. And so measuring kind of monthly loads that these baskets are capturing, as you can see, let's say about 160 pieces of rubber and between 23 and 80,000 pieces of grass are being captured per month in each basket. That's one average of one basket per month. The variation just means if it's wet or dry. And interestingly, the big range with the synthetic grass, that the higher number is after rainfall. So the grass is more mobile and moves through into the drains more readily. The crumb being a heavier, it kind of sits and didn't change too much whether it was rain or not. So anyway, lots of pieces come off is really what that's saying, but by having measures in place around the field, and there is, as we've heard, some guidelines now for synthetic sports fields, and there is an Australian standard for these fields, it will trap or capture most of that material, probably 90% or so, is captured if they have the right techniques. Not all fields do, some fields do, and I know Chroma's an example of one that has some good mitigation measures in place. But what we found, even when there is baskets, and that last line there shows that it still bypasses. As you're probably well aware, it gets walked off, so it gets stuck in the player's shoes or whatever, and they get walked off. And so we found by sampling a creek downstream of these fields, we were still finding it in the creeks, both the crumb and the grass blades. And the grass blades were more mobile, so they were further down the stream than the rubber crumb. So what I'm saying, I suppose, is once you've got a field in an area, you're going to get loss, irrespective of the techniques or mitigation measures you put in place. Through our AusMap program, so AusMap's the Australian Microplastic Assessment Project, we sample for microplastics, all microplastics around Australia. And this is data just from synthetic grass that we have found in Sydney particularly. The map on the right and each of those points are where we found grass in our waterways. And the different coloured dots really mean whether it's low or high. So green is less than 10 blades per square metre. Everything's kind of measured as a per square metre as a standard way of reporting. You can see some high points. In Botany Bay, it was over 1,000 per square metre. That's huge, huge amounts of synthetic grass. That was right near the mouth of the Cooks River. So obviously there's something, and I'm not saying it's all coming from synthetic sports fields, because as we know, it's in people's homes, in schoolyards, playgrounds, etc. But we're finding that the grass increasing. In the northern beaches, obviously, you can see Dee Why Lagoon, Manly Lagoon, North Harbour area, all have evidence of grass. And we've got data going back. And interestingly, we're seeing an increase in this over time now, the grass blades washing up. So the blue is Manly Cove, and while there was a spike in 2022, it's been consistently high since that time period as prior to that time. It could be something to do with, we've had a lot of wet years over that time period, and we know 2019 was dry-ish, drier. So the rain definitely has a factor, we think, in this case. And Rose Bay, just on the other side, is interestingly going up each year. So they're the amounts, once again, per metre squared on average for that year. So what are some of the things that influence that loss? It's a range of factors, as you can see there. There's not just one thing. Obviously, rainfall plays a part, how much activity there is on the field, the construction, the quality of the material, definitely, the type of weave or yarn that they use, all plays a part. And then obviously the mitigation measures that field has or doesn't have is going to affect what's coming off. And then just as it ages, we know it wears more and loses more. And then there's been some nice studies, not with the whole fields, but with smaller kind of play areas that shading or cover, reducing that UV exposure makes a big difference to the life and the loss then of microplastics from that field. So range of factors that need to consider. And just my last slide is to think about going forward, what changes do we need to implement? I like what's happening in Europe. The EU has implemented some strategies for restricting at least the infill material in synthetic sports fields. That's something we can implement here, either locally or statewide. Setting microplastic targets is something also going on. Can we set to reduce how much microplastics are being released? This could be, so there's intentionally added microplastics like the rubber crumb, and then there's reducing unintentional release of microplastics, which might be more the blades. So can we use existing legislation? And Sue might talk a bit about this. So there's been a new piece of legislation that came out in New South Wales earlier in the year, the Product Life Cycle Responsibility Act is really about extended producer responsibility. So if a producer creates a product that is likely to cause harm to the environment or humans, the onus is on that producer to then reduce that harm or prevent it from happening in the first place. So I think there's some instruments, but I don't want to steal Sue's thunder going forward. So I'll leave it there, and obviously you can ask me questions a bit later. So thank you.
I've got the Greens up there because the Greens are hosting, but we are a non-political group. We came together as a community and we talk to all communities, and that's, we just want to say thank you to the Greens for hosting today. Here are some numbers. We were formed in 2022. There are 22 community groups that we're part of. That means 22 community groups which already have hundreds and thousands of people are actually part of the Natural Turf Alliance. We are all volunteers, there's no payments. We've been through 2 court cases, that was West Pymble and Banksia, which is where I was from, and there's a new case coming up in Castle Hill. Synthetic fields in New South Wales, we only know about the 200 that were mentioned in the Chief Scientist report. The number 4 is the number of fields that we have stopped from becoming synthetic because they saw the benefits of natural turf. Those 4 fields are at Middlehead, which is Mossman, Greenwich, West Pymble, although that's still a bit iffy at the moment, and at Gladesville. And some of the reasons why they didn't go with synthetic is because of the cost of the area, whether it was flooding, whether it was just too expensive. So there are many reasons why natural turf is the better alternative. 200 plus, obviously, the number of fields that are around. 18 is a number of families that moved away when Banksia, Gardner Park where I'm from, 18 families have moved away in the last 2 years since the synthetic turf was installed. And there's many reasons why. It's an increase of use, it's increase of noise. It was an unsuitable field, but 18 families have chosen to move rather than stay next to a synthetic field. There is a huge cost to the community when this happens, and I'll go through some of those as well. So the other question mark on there is how many schools, education facilities, preschools, daycare centres have plastic turf? That's another question that's come up with us. We started off with local parks, and now we're actually looking at schools and play centres as well. And that's a real question mark because we keep seeing a lot of it around. Our current campaigns are around 2. We've got one at Callan Park, which is the inner west. They're trying to put a synthetic turf field next to the water, where they've also decided to have an outdoor swimming pool as well. And Fred Caddison at Castle Hill, they want to keep the bushland and the old pony club site. And yeah, there's an increase of usage there as well. But look, we advocate for this based upon scientific evidence. And when we were going through the court case, the judge said, you know, you're not experts at all, and we felt very admonished. So we turned around, and it was Greta Werner, who was one of our on our team, and she said, you should just call the universities. And I can't tell you how helpful all of our experts have been. They have given so much time to us. We have almost an advisory board of plastics and environment, etc. So scientists have been so helpful to all of us. Okay, but there's been such an impact on residents when a field comes across, and that's why there's 22 community groups who are all telling us their stories. But why do these synthetic fields go ahead? Well, councils are using an austerity budget and they're not looking after their fields, and we recognise that. We recognise there are dirt patches, there's bad drainage, and if they actually put the proper money into it, and I'm sure, and Mick Badham, our soil scientist, he'll tell you about how you can improve all of that. But then you've got this government grant that comes along and they say, well, here's $2 million to put in a synthetic field, so they just drop the idea of increasing the natural turf field. So we're fighting against a grant when in fact we know they didn't have the budget to start with. We're also up against sporting groups who are very organised. They've got their mailing lists. They actually, they can say we've lost all these matches. But the communities who use those parks when the sporting fields are not there, they are also very important, whether we're the dog walkers, whether we're the parents or the grandparents taking our kids up. But there's lots of things that do happen to parks when the sporting groups aren't there. And when you install synthetic turf, everybody else is pushed away. You won't have AFL, you won't have touch football, you won't have bulls, you won't have kites and frisbees. Everything disappears when you put up a fence and you put on a synthetic turf field. Now, I can say this with authority because when we lost the court case and they put in the synthetic at Gardner Park, we were there living with synthetic and seeing exactly the changes. We weren't able to use our park anymore. That's a space that we could all use. After work, after school, we lost our park, and that is not fair. It's a community space. Now, people were actually starting to distrust natural turf, which is where we actually called Dr. Mick Batten, one of our soil scientists, and he just told us we can do all sorts of things with natural turf, so I'll let him explain all of that. But synthetic is seen as a magical solution, so we have to look into that. What actually is synthetic doing to us? But community consultation is our strength, and what I love is that people just come out of nowhere and they will tell you what's actually going on. Thank you. So the arguments for is that they want more playing time. We understand that because it gets damaged by overuse. The council's not looking after the parks, and of course wet weather. So these are things that are always going to happen, but we just want to improve that soil. Again, I'll leave that a conversation to Mick and all the soil. The arguments against synthetic turf, there is a financial, a social and an environmental issue. Financially, these are very expensive fields. If you give $2 million to one soccer team, you've probably got 9 others in the LGA who'd also want $2 million. So suddenly you've got every soccer club or hockey club or anybody else wanting the same amount of money spent on them. Socially, I've already said how we've actually destroyed our communities because we're not using our local parks for everybody. And environmentally, we've started to hear about all of the heat and the plastics as well. What also came through in the Chief Scientist report was that synthetic turf fields are highly flammable. Now, we don't have any standards for the testing, so the manufacturers have been testing the fields as an indoor carpet, when instead they should be testing them as an outdoor building product. When it's an outdoor product, I'll take questions afterwards. When it's an outdoor product, it's then reduced to wind and fire and other embers. Then synthetic turf, the ones that were tested by the scientists in the report, said they were highly flammable. And I've actually got some slides. I've got little videos just after this as well. Obviously the pollution and of course the single use, so that's a loss to other people. So these are the arguments against having synthetic turf. So recycling, there's been a lot of talk about that. The picture on the far side is Northbridge Oval. Now Northbridge Oval, that's the topping up of the rubber crumb that we've just heard of. So they are 1,000-kilo bags, and that's what you top up the field with. So they've obviously lost all that crumb, and then they have to keep topping it up. The middle photo is Cromer. So Cromer Park, they wanted the rolled up field, which had been taken off, which is on this side. That was actually sitting there for 18 months and it was disintegrating next to the field. Apparently they wanted the rolls of turf to actually go off to the Netherlands, which was the supposed recycling centre. The recycling centre in the Netherlands got shut down because it was using Russian gas and the Ukraine war stopped that. But in fact, they opened up another one called Reform, which is near Albury-Wodonga. So a synthetic turf company has actually opened Reform. We know that those fields were one of the first to go down to Albury-Wodonga. We're not sure exactly how much it costs to ship all of that down to Albury-Wodonga. We're not sure what the product is at the end of that. We know they shake out the sand and they clean that and they shake out the rubber crumb and that. We're not sure what they do with the actual turf. We think they give it away to agriculture and they use it on the bottom of sheds and stables. So yeah, all weather, it's not. That's the thing I can say to you. Everybody knows it's hot in summer. There was an article in the Herald this week about artificial turf in Chatswood Concourse, and all of the comments were saying, we know it's hot, we know it's hot, we know it's hot. So I think we're all understanding now that synthetic turf does get very hot. So we've also relied upon documents. Now these documents have been created since we started the Natural Turf Alliance. Again, we'd like to thank Rob Stokes for putting together the first of them, which is the Urban Ethos report. That one was the very first report that came out and said, yes, I think we need to do a scientific report. The scientific report is the chief scientist one, and this one has all the appendices from the scientists, which includes all of the microplastics, the pollutions, and about 18 different topics. Then we've got the middle one, which is the best practice guidelines for sporting fields. That's mix one. And then just the two that came out recently, because we've been asking for some guidelines. We want councils to have a checkbox to say this is a heritage park, or this has got a flooding zone, or this is, next to, it doesn't have the car parking for intense use. So the guidelines have come out. There's an addendum in there which also covers schools, which we're pleased about. So these are the 5 documents that we rely upon to get our information from. So look, the Natural Turf Alliance is there. If you want to call us, you want to send us an email, we actually like to have a chat with you. We can actually help you through all sorts of question marks that you might have, because I'm probably not going to cover everything that you're thinking about. So I'm very happy to take those phone calls. Next one. So what we're now seeing, because synthetic turf has been around for 10 years or so, we're starting to see how it fails. Because it looks great at the beginning, but how are these failing? They're failing in different ways. Okay, so on the far side, when synthetic turf, when it's wet, the rubber crumb sticks to your hands. It's pretty simple. That's another way that we get lost. The big picture in the middle is Mitchelton Oval in Brisbane. That's next to a creek. So during the Brisbane floods, the whole everything underneath it just got lifted up and went away. Next to this synthetic field is a grass field, and that was back up and playing within a week. So there was no cost when, apart from just moving the debris, but there is a synthetic turf field next to a creek. So obviously the checkbox for flooding wasn't actually ticked. Okay, this is Chatswood High School. In January earlier this year, this field was starting to fall apart. We were seeing all these posts from parents saying, I've got all this crumb and rubber on my kids' cleats, how do I get it off? And they were sharing tips about hairdryers, spanners, how do I get the cleats off? The glue was actually coming apart. It was sticking in kids' cleats, and so they've actually had to rip that up again. Okay, this is Corkfield at Tempe. Again, this is in 2022. It's been in place for about 2 years. So after the rain, this is how the cork moves in the field. So that cork moves, and it moves across the field, it moves into the drains, it moves into the car park. Then it has to be rotated back in again. Now, can you play that in the rain? This is one of the arguments, it's all weather. So that's cork. I think there's one more. This is West Pymble. So this one's, the construction has actually stopped because, again, the flooding wasn't actually adhered to. The hydrology reports were very old. So this one's gone through a court case. We start off at about 3 million, and this is now up to about 13 million. So this is one soccer field that's costing 13 million, and they still haven't finished it. It's now gravel. The creek that's below this goes into the Lane Cove River, and every time they kept trying to move it, they just flooded the creek with all of the soil and the debris. So mitigation, flood zones, rain, debris. This is the problem with synthetic turf fields, is there's so much movement of the soil, so much drainage they're trying to put in. They're not easy fields to build, and we're starting to see the failures which cost the community and the ratepayers, when in fact Natural Turf doesn't have nearly as many problems. So as I said, Natural Turf Alliance is a bunch of people. We're happy to take phone calls, we're happy for information, and we do rely upon our experts. But this is our citizen science part, where we actually just find out what's been going on with synthetic turf fields. Thank you so much.
Just a little bit of background. I'm a soil scientist. It's very different to many of the other scientists that you'll see out there. It's basically a geologist for soils, and so I worked a lot in agriculture and that, and do a lot of stuff with the turf farmers and home fact sheets, irrigation guidelines for Darwin's, anything like that. So really unusual sort of things. It's a really cool job actually, except when it's hot and you have to dig holes. Most of you would know me from some of the sporting fields where we've done it, and we've got fields to handle 45 to 55 hours a week of use. So that's where most of you would know me from. Okay, you want to keep going? I'm just going to present you some numbers. We were able to get some player numbers from the football associations. The other one we couldn't get was rugby union. So we've got player numbers on all the sporting fields, all the natural turf sporting fields. We've got the synthetic ones too, but they're not in our write-up of the sporting fields in the North Shore. So that's everywhere east of Windsor Road and everywhere north of the Parramatta River. We didn't get every field. We got about 95% of them because some of them are privately owned or some of them have got fences around them and we couldn't get access to them, okay? Now what we found, there was about 70,000 very roughly registered players using these fields during the winter sports season. The reason why it's approximate is because we didn't have the rugby numbers. We've taken a stab at that, okay? What we found is on Sydney's North Shore, about half of those sporting fields actually received low levels of wear. Now, what do we define as low levels of wear? Less than 175 players per field. Now, that's their training and their playing on the weekend. Now, you might think 175 players, why do we pick that number as the cutoff for low? Because that's what Kikuyu grass can handle, okay? By the way, they say there's a lack of sporting fields in Sydney's North Shore, and there is in isolated pockets. There certainly is, okay? But have a look. If you click on this, click on that thing there. Just click forward. You'll see that actually almost a quarter of the sporting fields on Sydney's North Shore don't even have lights. I didn't expect that number, okay? I was quite shocked when I saw that. We're not talking about the little parks. You know, there's little parks that don't have lights. Now, there actually are some very big sites that don't have parks, okay? There are some very large sites, even in the inner parts of, even some here in the northern beaches, but in the inner parts of Sydney's North Shore that are 4.5 hectares in size. That's 4.5 rugby fields, if you like, so 5 soccer fields in size, no lights, okay? I never expected to find that kind of data, but that's exactly what's out there. Keep going. I'm going to talk to you very briefly about the steps you need to take to get a best practice field, okay? Get a decent soil, get the turf right, get the drainage right, and look after the management. If you want some notes on this, this is a 67-page document that I wrote with Dr. Paul Lamble, and this is a New South Wales government document. And it's been peer reviewed by Graham Logan, who used to be in charge of ANZ Stadium and the Parramatta Stadium. It's been peer reviewed by Peter McMaugh, who named Sir Walter Buffalo and built sporting fields and polo fields for Kerry Packer. In fact, he's actually known for telling Kerry Packer off, that guy in our industry. And Dr. Peter Martin, who oversaw the reconstruction of Wembley Stadium. So it's been properly peer reviewed. This isn't marketing material, this is peer reviewed documents, okay? What is best practice turf? Everybody straight away thinks it's got to be able to handle 45 hours a week of use or something really high, right? No, it's only got to handle the usage that it's getting. Some of these fields, they don't have lights, so it's very easy for us to get the grass to handle that, okay? Whereas the fields that are getting smashed, we have to get lots of things right in order for them to get to handle it, okay? Keep going. Okay, the first thing you need in order for a sporting field to be suitable, it's got to be safe, okay? It's got to be even to play on, and it can't be too hard. You can't fall over and hurt yourself. But there are some other safety concerns concerning contaminants. Okay, keep going. With natural turf over the years, there have been issues with asbestos, okay? They're not such an issue anymore, but occasionally they still come up. And in localised areas, especially around the Newcastle area, there were issues with lead and that in some of the materials that they were using to fill areas. Less of a problem in these areas around here, okay? Now, how do we get around that? We write in our guidelines or in our specifications, you have to adhere to Australian standard, right? And it's the same thing that needs to happen with the synthetic fields, okay? You should write in your guidelines that you adhere to, okay, let's make sure that we don't have banned substances in our in our products. And it doesn't have to cost anybody anything. It can be just a tender requirement. And that way, when the manufacturers or whoever goes to tender for it, they know that they've got to comply with a standard rather than they can do anything. Keep going. In order to be, this field here is safe, it's even, and it's soft, isn't it? You're not going to hurt yourself on that, are you? No, it hasn't got grass on it. It's got to have grass cover as well, and you can't have massive amounts of cancellations, okay? That field there is obviously draining poorly, and you're going to end up with a lot of cancellations. Now, with regards to synthetic turf, it's more to do with the hot weather and intense rain when you have the cancellations. And if you click that, synthetic fields are not suitable for cricket, okay? I'm a cricket player. If you just hit an on drive on a synthetic surface, if it's a hockey field, you know, it's a much lower grass, it'll roll. But if you hit an on drive on one of these fields that have got a tall pile, it won't go anywhere. I'd be lucky to smash it to the wall over there, okay? So I can't actually physically play my game. I've got to change the way I play my game. It changes the nature of it. The heat is a massive issue. We stand out there on days sometimes and it's 35 degrees. A typical sort of day in Sydney where it gets over 30 degrees is about 25, 30 days a year. That's a typical sort of season. Now, that's a significant part of the cricket season, okay? If you're out in Penrith, it's like 70-something days a year. And if it's a drought, those numbers will double for both Sydney and that, okay? It's not a suitable surface. Also, I've got bare arms, yeah? If I'm a cricketer, I'm going to dive and land on it, I'm going to end up with friction burns, okay? It's not a surface for cricket. It's not suitable for cricket. Keep going. Okay, so how do you create a best practice field? And the first thing you need to do is get the soil suitable. When you go to build, say, the SCG or the MCG or that, what they do, they build them out of sand. See the sand up the top there? Sand doesn't hold much water. So what they do is they put gravel underneath it. And the gravel doesn't suck very much, okay? So it's kind of like, imagine you had wet washing that had stopped dripping. If you went and got some gravel and put it underneath it, it wouldn't pull the water out of the washing, would it? Okay? It allows the washing to still stay wet. That gravel layer is not about drainage, it's about making the sand hold more water, okay? Now they also put a lot of coconut fibre in, or you could use compost, okay? That's how they build them. Now councils get this idea that they want to build the MCG or the SCG, but they run out of money. Keep going. So they take the gravel layer out. The gravel layer was making the sand hold water, right? So now all of a sudden you've got sand over something that will suck the water out. If you put a handful of clay, crushed up clay, underneath your wet washing, it'd draw the water out, wouldn't it? And not only that, they didn't have the money for the coconut fibre either. So now you end up with a situation, keep going, where you've got dry sand, and dry sand just slides around, keep going. And it cannot handle these fields. When they build the fields this way with the sand over soil, we've called it SOS for real reasons, the SOS sign should be coming out. They can't handle more than about 250 players a week, okay? And even one of my competitors say they can't handle more than 20 hours a week. So why do councils build the fields this way? Because they're aspiring to build the SCG and they run out of money, okay? Essentially that's what's happened. Here is a field built in 2023 that's built out of basically sand straight over the top of soil. It's not quite sand, this is an 80-20 mix, but very sandy material. You can see it's fallen apart. Go to the next one. Here's another field built in 2023. First thing the club's gonna do is say, we want a synthetic field because turf can't handle it. When in fact, this was just a disaster to start with, okay? They had to build it properly, but they didn't. If you don't have the money, that's easy. Just use soil, just fix soil up, okay? So if you put some compost, you can see I've put some compost in this soil. That'll work, bit of gypsum in it. Whereas this soil here, this is the same type of soil, except it's rock hard, okay? That's not suitable, okay? So basically, to get the soil right, either build the SCG, do it properly, or amend your soil. But don't go these half in-between solutions, they won't work. And this is basically what's happened over time. The one down the bottom right there, that's the average field. There's no amenders in it, no nothing. They haven't done anything. And that's the newer fields. A lot of the newer fields they build, they just run out of money and that's what they do. Okay? If you put compost into soil, it will handle massive amounts of wear. These fields have the same turf cultivar and they're the same soil type, okay? They both get very high levels of wear. Look at the difference between them. That's just compost. It's like adding cordial to water. That's how effective the compost is. Compost has about 50 units per volume of holding capacity of nutrients, whereas that soil there holds about 5. So you don't have to add much of the 50 in order to make it a lot better. Keep going. Suitable turf. This is one thing that's very low-hanging fruit that they don't do. Keep going. This is a field that gets belted, and you can see I've just put barriers there, or put lines there to show you the difference in wear capacity of these grasses. And you can see that the kikuyu, even though it's a bit greener, is actually just worn out. Yeah, it can't handle more than about 175 players a week. The Cooch 2 up there, which is an older Cooch, it's hopeless too. And the Cooch 1 is much better than all the others, okay? This is the fibre content per square metre. So the amount of really hard material in the grass per square metre for the different grasses. These are the newer grasses. And this is kikuyu, which is the majority of fields. Actually, about 70% of fields in Sydney's North Shore are this grass here. And look at this. These newer grasses have about 4 times the density of fibrous material per square metre as kikuyu. Is that surprising? These grasses were bred in the last 15 years. This grass was bred in 1912. It's just old tech. There's nothing wrong with it, it's just old tech. Okay? And about 10% of the grasses on Sydney's North Shore are actually these grasses. Why on earth they use those, I'm not sure. And some of the time I spend is convincing councils not to use silly grasses. By the way, you can't put more than about 600 players on a soccer field. You actually run out of time slots on the weekend. There are a few exceptions to that rule where they've got really young players and they compromise how much space they have to train on. The most intensely used field I've ever seen has got about 820 players per field. But as a general rule, about 550 players per field is about it. You're running out of physical space. It doesn't matter what you build it out of, you just simply can't book enough time slots on the weekend to fill in the games, okay? So this is Santa Ana. It's one of the better grasses, but not the best grasses. And the soil's reasonable at this site, and it's handled 450 players, and this is it. I'm showing it recovered here. Keep going. This is Santa Ana, which is the one I just showed you, versus one of the newer ones. You can see one of the newer grasses is even better. Okay? Yeah, keep going. If you build the field wrong, it will struggle to handle any use, okay? Wrong grass, layering in the soil, massive problems, okay? Right grass, decent soil, it'll handle it, okay? It's just very, very simple, okay? Keep going. Okay, suitable drainage. This is the thing that a lot of the soccer clubs, and I don't blame them, I'm a cricketer, I'm sick of just having cancellations all the time. The first thing you can do to get a decent draining field is stop the water from the car park, or in this case the netball courts, from running onto the field. Now I know at this particular site it would solve the problem entirely. How do I know that? Because the other side of the field is dry when I walk on it, okay? How many times do you see the amenity building and just near the amenity building is wet, and if you look around, you'll often find the gutters are just flowing onto the ground and onto the field. Sometimes they even put the downpipes straight onto the field, okay? It shouldn't have hills or anything like that. Put something around it, stop the water coming onto it. Like just a gutter edge around the edge of that, or just even a swale, anything. Yeah, keep going. Layering problem. This is a massive problem. This is a fairly sandy soil here. And they've bought turf from a turf farm with clay attached. You don't have to do that. You can buy turf from a turf farm where they grow it on sandy soil. And they just patch the goals, and you can see that everything drains except the goals, okay? Glad wrapping your field. If you do have drainage problems, for about $150,000 a field, you can solve your drainage problems, okay? Now, unfortunately, what's happening is, generally speaking, you need about 2 metres between the sand slits on your fields. A lot of the soccer fields, when they do them, again, the councils don't have enough money, or for whatever reason, they take a shortcut. They'll put the sand slits 4 metres. I've even seen them 8 and 10 metres apart. 4 metres apart is not half as good as 2 metres, right? It's actually a squared relationship. 4 metres apart is a quarter as good as 2 metres, okay? They need to do these things properly. You put the drains in about 2 metres apart. Every design's different, but like if you get 2 metre spacing when they put the sand slits in, generally your field will drain well, okay? $150,000 a field. Okay, synthetic turf. How much does it cost? Very roughly, it's about $4 million per hectare, okay? Very roughly in today's dollars. Now, in 2014, they upgraded the MCG. They pulled the surface out, put it back again, put the drainage in, okay? If I converted that, it was $1.4 million at the time, but I converted it into today's dollars, and the MCG is about half the price of a synthetic field. That's unbelievable, isn't it? Okay? Just to put that in perspective. Now, we know that the MCG and these other fields can be made to drain rapidly. There is one field that I can think of that's a stadium field where they've messed up. But if you have a look at that footprint there, if you had that level of intensity of rainfall, the cork infill would flow away, okay? So there are other issues related to synthetic and natural turf that are both intertwined here. But look at the price. That's incredible. Okay, $4 million. What could you do for $4 million? Well, you could probably put in about 36 drainage systems. Or you can help 10,000 players, that's just 200 football players on the 36 fields and 77 cricketers on those fields, yeah? Or you can help God's chosen few, 500, right? What are they going to do? Fix my home ground and nobody else's home ground? But I play on the other home grounds anyway. Everybody benefits. This is just a simple comparison of what needs to happen. You'd be better off building 2 MCGs, wouldn't you? Keep going. There are other clubs out there that need to be helped, okay? It's not, we fix this one field. Like, there's a field in another council at the moment they've spent an unbelievable amount of money on. What, is nobody else going to get anything fixed for 10 years until they pay for that budget? That's just crazy. Yep, keep going. It's $400 per player to fix the drainage systems on all those fields versus $8,000 per player. That's unbelievable. And it gets worse. In 9 years, I'll need another $1 million to fix the field up again, won't they? Okay, this is just simple economics. Yep, keep going. Okay, you can get fields to drain, but you have to put the drainage system in right, okay, and stop the water running onto the field. That's not a drama at all. Effective management. A lot of councils get wrapped on management, but I say a lot of things can come back to the clubs. Like, I play cricket, and our cricket run-up areas get worn out at the end of or they get compacted. Why can't our cricket club go around with a garden fork and fix those little areas up? It's our cricket field, why wouldn't we? And the same with the soccer clubs. Why can't, this is very, very cheap, this site's got enough space, but why can't the field, if you had movable goals, just be put there next year? It's almost no cost at this particular site. You're just marking the field in a different spot. I mean, you can even put it back in the other spots for finals time if you really wanted to. Or if you don't have enough space, keep going, you can put hybrid turf in very little areas, and you'll see on a lot of soccer fields, it's only areas about twice as big as this that are really bad, except for the fields that are being built really badly, okay? So keep going. So you could put hybrid turf just in these little areas here, okay? Now hybrid turf, where it's got no fibres on the surface, you can play cricket on that too. It's a win all round for everyone. Yep. Don't oversow high use fields. I know soccer clubs want the fields to be green, but the ryegrass can't handle more than about 250 players on it. It just ends up being a trip hazard beyond that anyway. So if you really have a problem with the turf colour, yep, do what they do on the stadium fields and spray paint it green. It sounds funny. Actually, if you put the green colourant on in May, what happens is the grass actually heats up. The colourant actually makes the grass grow faster. And sometimes when you'll see the black lines on soccer fields and that kind of stuff, they're marked up with black instead of white. It'll actually grow more in those areas. In fact, there's a turf farmer out at Bathurst that actually sprays his paddocks, colours his paddocks in order to make the grass keep growing. And then again, when you get to, say, September, you spray it green, it'll come out of that dormancy quicker. Okay, you can buy yourself about 3 weeks. Yeah, keep going. Just wanted to finish on this little bit on Middlehead Oval. Many of you would have seen Middlehead Oval. They were going to convert it to synthetic. They would have needed a budget of, at the time, okay, this is going back 2018, I think, they would have needed about $4 million because it's 1.5 hectares in size. When we got asked to convert it to a best practice natural turf field, they only had a budget of $440,000. So all of a sudden we're dealing with 1/9 or 1/10 of the budget that the synthetic turf field would have happened. And that really summarises the problem that is going on here. Okay, how are we supposed to try and fix this up? Now we stopped the water running onto the field. We put some amenders into the soil and we used a decent grass, but we put an irrigation system in because the old one had it, okay? But we couldn't afford to put a drainage system in. Didn't have the budget for it. Keep going. Now that field, during the drier years, it performed brilliant, okay? And this is it at the end of the 2019 season, I think it was. Yeah, keep going. And it just keeps greening up and it's done well year after year. It does get dull coloured in the middle of winter, but keep in mind this is like the 90th percentile for usage for sporting fields in Sydney. Okay, keep going. It needs a drainage system, right? That field generally drains okay until there's extended periods of rain, and because there's a rock shelf underneath, eventually it builds up. So 220,000, they could put a drainage system in there. Yep, keep going. But that council has other users. It's already built that field. In other words, this is how it should work. These people had money spent on them, then these people had money spent on them, and then these, and eventually it'll get back round and they'll get their drainage system, okay? That's how it should be working. I just wanted to finish on this thing here. This is a pile of soil with some compost in it that we left on a sporting field for about 6 months. Not this one here, that's just soil. That's soil with the compost in it right there. You can see what a difference it makes, okay? And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for having me. Look, I am going to mention the Chief Scientist report, but really, I just feel like we're incredibly fortunate, aren't we? We've just had the most compelling 3 people speak to us and tell us how kind of absurd the predicament that we are facing in terms of synthetic turf. It feels like it was just a sort of bad idea that someone got carried away with, and now we're going to have to fix it all up or something. That's what it certainly sounds like to me. So yeah, we know that it was Rob Stokes in 2022 that was lobbied hard by a bunch of wonderful people who were genuinely concerned about the fact that we were heading in a direction of replacing natural turf with synthetic turf across various public fields and sports grounds across the Sydney area. And he, being the very reasonable guy he is and was then, said, yeah, look, there are some real questions that need to be asked, but there is a lot of scientific uncertainty about what people were saying. But of course, the reality is the concerns that were being raised in 2022 are the concerns that are still being raised now. Synthetic turf is too hot. We now know it's at least 38 degrees hotter than natural turf. That's pretty significant when you're talking about a downed hot day and a bunch of little kids, and you're talking about significant injury. We know that it is plastics, and I don't know about you guys, but I know quite a bit about plastics, and I think that the world has got to the place where, frankly, we've got too much plastic in the environment. We've got too much plastic in ourselves, and we've got too much plastic appearing in young people's bloodstreams. That's the reality. We now know we're faced with microplastics kind of everywhere, and we're dealing with now the prevalence of PFAS and PFOS in the natural environment. We know these synthetic turf areas. I've seen some in the Hornsby, Castle Hill area, the areas where we're promoting or heading in the synthetic turf direction, and some of the waterways of these areas that will flow, these synthetic turf fields will flow into, these waterways are where we're still absolutely fortunate and blessed that we've got platypus living in them, you know? So the very idea that we would do anything in an environment as built up and as densely populated and as beautiful as the Sydney Greater Basin and Region area, that we would be doing anything that further jeopardises our natural environment through the build-up of avoidable plastics in the environment is almost madness right now. It really is. And the reality is we know that climate change isn't coming, it's here, and it's just a matter now of how rapid the impacts of climate change are felt across our communities. I'm somebody from the Northern Rivers. I'm not from this beautiful place that you are all from. I'm from Lismore, and I can assure you, when we talk about climate change, we know damn well it's well and truly upon us. And I mention that here and now because we are going to see radical increases in flood events and in places we didn't know we would necessarily have those flood events. Precipitation has changed, rainfall patterns have changed, and we know that rain is not a thing that we've been used to, that it can be intense and it can come in ways that maybe you didn't anticipate it could. I know that where I'm from and the rain event we experienced, I can guarantee rain can happen like you would never imagine rain can actually happen. And we know that. That's one of the predictions of the changing climate. So the other factor that is being raised as a significant issue is the bushfire risk and the increase of fire. And we know that one ember on these synthetic fields and we're up in flames, and the toxicity of that intensity and those kind of fire events. But ultimately that's what, you know, they are the risks, they are the harms, they are the dangers. And I just think you've heard it so loud and clear. My two areas of expertise. One, I'm a lawyer. The one thing we do as lawyers and the tool that we have in our belt is understanding how to assess evidence, how to look at it, how to hear it, how to weigh it up, and how to use it. And I can guarantee tonight, just after hearing these people speak, I can guarantee that the weight of evidence really is on the side of this is actually a bad experiment and it's probably time to walk away from it as quickly as we possibly can. And when you hear the case from Mick about actually with the right investment and the right political will and desire, we can have excellent, high use, totally appropriate use and designed natural turf fields across all of our urbanised areas, and we can get the satisfaction and the use that we require and that we need that is reasonable for young people, middle-aged people, old people who want to use these facilities in our community. The reality is we have seen this massive proliferation. We now know there are about 200 or more synthetic turf fields across the environment here in Sydney. But the one thing that we have been able to do as Greens recently through the Parliament and the pressure that we've managed to put is get New South Wales Department of Education to admit and accept that these facilities are not good in our schools. We should not be moving to synthetic sports fields in our schools. The Department of Education is accepting that there are risks, there are harms, there are dangers, and they have committed. The other thing is they don't know exactly how many there are in the school system across New South Wales. They have committed to do an audit around that, and they've committed to report back on what that looks like and what the current situation is. Pretty outrageous, really, I think, that we would have a system with our young children, our schools, and the Department of Education wouldn't actually even know in terms of an audit or have a monitored record or data collected system that we can understand the risks that we are posing to how many children across New South Wales. We have got those guidelines you saw on the slide. We've got those guidelines for development consent authorities about ticking boxes and making the development requirements around the installation and development of synthetic fields, that you have to satisfy a bunch of requirements. The truth about planning law and planning guidelines is, at the end of the day, they are applied discretionary, in a discretionary way, and some operators will get away with things that others won't. I think, the comment that public participation is our greatest tool around this, it is true. The more people raise their voices and bring their concerns to the attention of those consent authorities that approve these at the outset, that is where we win or lose these arguments. The other thing I would say about that is sometimes you feel like you're the lone voice out there. You feel like you are the only person screaming the logic into these places where these people make decisions. But you need to remember that it has to start somewhere, and if it's you alone doing this work, you are literally on the right side of history. You are our champions. Please don't for a minute let anyone tell you otherwise. I strongly suspect that we are at a point in time where sense is coming to the forefront, and we know that everything in terms of the weight of evidence is on our side. It has been about trying to hold the real craziness of everything being converted to synthetic turf, holding that back. We have got the number we've got now. I think that we are at a point where people who have been ringing the alarm bells have rung them loud. Those that need to hear are starting to hear them. And of course, the economics of this is not adding up. It's not stacking up. I don't know what it is about humans, but we're always looking for some silver bullet, some magic wand, some brilliant magic fix-all product. At some point, everyone comes back to realise that actually there is nothing better than good healthy soil, good clean water, good fresh air, a bunch of elbow grease in the process, and a bunch of wonderful connected people who are willing to work together to get to those more natural, genuine outcomes that we need for our communities. So right now in the New South Wales Parliament, my colleagues and I, particularly my colleague Dr. Amanda Conn, who is an absolute champion on this synthetic turf issue. She is a GP, a professional expert doctor. She's also a sports freak. She loves sports and she holds our portfolio for sport as well. She has been working around the clock to make sure every decision maker, whether it's the Minister for Education, the Minister for Health, the Minister for the Environment, the Minister for Sports, she is doing everything to make sure that all of those ministers are not going to get away with this madness for any longer. For some reason, it is a little bit like the public interest that those ministers are meant to be holding and driving as their primary responsibility has kind of sat in the back rooms while the proponents and those that make money out of the synthetic turf and those sports organisations that really, for some reason, have been convinced these are the right way to go, they seem to have got some runs ahead and in front. We're now on catch up, and I think that the time is now We are catching up, and we're not going to let the madness continue. So we guarantee that we will continue to do that work in the Parliament, to hold those ministers to account, to slow down the rollout. We've been calling for a moratorium across the board on all synthetic turf fields, and I think there is a good case for that moratorium. But at the absolute minimum, we are saying there should be no synthetic turf fields in high-risk bushfire areas. There should be none in known flood areas, and there should be none in certain proximity to natural watercourses. But at the end of the day, we believe the momentum is here for a full moratorium and then a wind back, because you can't beat a natural turf field, and that's the reality. But do we need to do that better, and do we need to invest more? Of course we do. And honestly, I thought the presentation about focusing back on basic principles, good drainage, compost, excellent maintenance, good design, that's what we need to do, and that's what we've got to get back to.